if you were to imagine Linode as your garage workspace,
Hmm.
and you start, and the first thing you buy is a drill press, because boy, you're going to do some drill press stuff, and that could be your compute. It's a it's a tool. It operates. It does a single thing. You probably do a lot of cool things with it, but it really just gets this one thing done. I think that is how Linode started. Single tool. If anybody needs it, you're the drill press guy.
Hmm.
And I think what we've endeavored to do, and the way we've kind of, I think, had to evolve within like the market that we exist in, is we've started building new tools to have in our garage. So now, like, you can do the drill pressing, but you also have a bandsaw, and you can build different things now. And we've endeavored to transition. In a lot of ways, I think there's like this level from like you start as this simple shop, and the upper echelon of that is you're an enterprise shop. And we've endeavored to add these tools over the course of the years. And in a lot of ways, it's been front loaded in the last 3 years, or back loaded in the last 3 years. And we've endeavored to add new tools that provide the ability for someone to get one step closer to our individual cloud environment being your enterprise level cloud environment.
In case you hadn't figured it out, today's episode is sponsored by Linode. Whether you're wanting to create your own Nextcloud storage or host your own WordPress blog or something a lot more advanced, Linode is your one-stop shop for an independent, open cloud. Nanode plans start from $5 a month and can scale up for specific CPU, GPU, or memory-intensive situations. So check out the link in the description or go to linode.com/galactic and be sure to use code galactic19 at checkout to receive $20 account credit. And special thanks to Linode for sponsoring today's episode. Welcome back. We're here on another episode of IG Talks, and today I have got Connor and Joe. They work for Linode. Which Linode, if you're not familiar, they are let me see if I can get this straight, the independent open cloud for developers. So they're a cloud provider. They do a bunch of amazing stuff with open source technology powering it. And the reason that we're having this conversation, I mean, I've interacted with Linode on a couple of occasions. They do a lot of great sponsorship work and engagement with a lot of Linux related channels. But I wanted to get these guys on and have a conversation with them because they have just opened up another data center in Sydney, and so they're kind of globally rolling out, and so I thought it'd be a great time to sit down and have a chat around what Linode is, and who they are, where they've come from, and what is involved when it comes to rolling out a data center, and some of the things that Linode have on offering these days. So first of all, big warm welcome to Connor and Joe. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves, and then we'll let everyone know where the conversation's going today.
Sure. So my name is Joseph Karang. I'm a systems engineer here at Linode. That's pretty much it.
I
engineer systems. Yep.
I am also a systems engineer at Linode, and I would say what Joe didn't give us the credit for is we are the back-end utility players of the entire company. So we have a fun position within systems where we have a bunch of front-end oriented devs, we have back-end product oriented devs, and then we are the grease that lubricates the cogs of what Linode does. So we're kind of all over the place on the back-end systems end.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we're talking to literally the men on the ground right here. And by the way, just a quick shout out to the lovely background behind you that makes you guys look so legit as systems engineers. Excellent. So so basically today's conversation, and I'm just kind of skipping through some of the notes here, is going to revolve around I guess where Linode has come from, and sort of what were the things that what was the unique opportunity there that Linode saw as a business, as a cloud provider, because you guys and we'll get into this, but you guys are one of those situations where you started very early in the game. It's not like you've just popped up in the last year or so seeing how much money there is to be made in cloud. You guys have been around for a while. And then we'll kind of move into opening another data center, what is involved in that, and why Sydney, and all that kind of thing. And then we'll talk about what is so significant about the open cloud as opposed to, you know, the big commercial players out there, and how do you feel that, you know, has positioned Linode well? And then also just for you guys personally, you know, if somebody is interested in working in your kind of role or in your kind of sphere, you know, what are some of the experiences or education or that kind of thing that can really help you out in that kind of role? And I think that'd just be a good one to kind of wrap up with for anyone who might be interested or anyone who might have that, you know, be developing that skill set. So yeah, let's start at the top, or let's take it way back. So I believe, or I could actually be getting this wrong now. I had it in my notes. I think it was the early 2000s that Linode got started. So feel free, dive into it. So what is Linode's backstory, and I guess a brief history, and what were some of the things that Linode was wanting to address in the cloud market?
So it's funny, I've been like checking myself prior to this interview a bunch of times now that, oh my gosh, what is the date that we started? What is the date that we started? Don't flub it. It's 2003. So I got that out in the open there.
Nice.
And so our CEO started doing sort of like just some hosting providing for himself, for friends. He's like largely at the time, in 2003, running it out of a couple servers in his basement. And he's doing all of this before like sort of some of the common tools for virtualization existed. So he's building his own solution, he's getting it up and running, and eventually, you know, it transitioned from, oh, a friend of a friend might want to use this, a friend of a friend of a friend might want to use this, to let's open this up and make it a product. Mm-hmm. And so we got started off from that small little like self-driven, bootstrapped upbringing, and have sort of blossomed ourselves into like a worldwide VM provider for cloud hosting.
Yeah.
So in those 16 years, we've opened now, I believe it's 12 data centers. We're at 12 unique locations around the globe. We have different things. We refer to them as like primitives, I guess. So things like block storage offerings. We just launched object storage. We have GPU offerings, and these are all things that are meeting the needs of our customers. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that really has driven the company has been support. It's always been support first. Anything that we can do to assist people. That's always been kind of the driving force of the company. Because we're an independent company, we don't have any kind of shareholders. We don't have outside like VC funding or anything like that. So ultimately, the people that we're selling to are the people that determine what we need. Right? So when a customer comes to us and says, we love Linode, we love everything that you guys offer, but we don't have GPUs. We need GPUs. We're trying to do whatever it might be. Maybe it's AI, machine learning, something like that. Can you get GPUs? So absolutely, we can do GPUs. So, you know, we set out, we start the initiatives, we get the resources that we need, we do the research, and then we're able to launch that product.
Wow. Yeah. So there's a bit more, from what I'm hearing, there's a little bit more agility, or a little bit more, you're able to create sort of bespoke solutions because of the fact your primary target is being able to support the customer in what they need, as opposed to turning a profit for shareholders and being the most economic solution in the business.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've always kind of pushed towards is like striving to have like a decent relationship with our customer base. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that we are pretty openly listening to what they need, what they desire, what they don't like about the platform, what we have to fix. And so that's kind of been like our big, like, I guess, our defining factor is like that type of relationship we try to cultivate. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Joe and I are also, just to put the shout out there to the support team, Joe and I are homegrown systems engineers. So we both started in our support team. That was the start of my Linux career, and I think Joe potentially the same. Mm-hmm. So there's kind of a cool atmosphere for that type of like personal development.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So in terms of, and I'll describe it like a bit of a spectrum. If you were to describe Linode as a company and sort of what, you know, the company values and that kind of thing, would you would you class it as a kind of a move fast, iterate and break things, or like move fast and break things, or would it be more like a gradual iterative progress? And if those were kind of two different ends of the spectrum, where do you reckon Linode would be as a company?
I mean, I think it's kind of funny. I think in some ways there are things that we have really been steadfast in our support and like gradual development of, like in terms of the actual platform that we have running our virtualization. So there are some ways in which we are very, we have like a very slow moving pace where we're considering each step as we take it.
Yeah.
But kind of the cool part about sort of the way we work is that's maybe what you consider like our base product offering is like our virtualization. But then when it comes to all of the other pieces behind the scenes that make that work, I think we do operate in a world where there's a license within each department to move fast, to fail fast, to iterate through solutions, to find what works best for us. I also think that's maybe something that, we've grown kind of exponentially over the years. And there's a lot of ways in which that like slow, methodical pacing is fine when we have a smaller platform with a more focused offering. But as we kind of get bigger and we scale up, there's like some things that we've really picked up the torch for moving fast, iterating fast, and trying to not lag behind in terms of the types of solutions we can offer customers and also like ourselves in terms of how the system works. So I think we have a little bit of both.
Yeah. I mean, just to touch on like the fast fail thing, we have stickers like almost like badges of honor for fast fail that people around the office just carry on their laptops, because it does signify something. It means, that, we've really considered things. We didn't waste time. Everything that we've done has been in that, like working towards something new, I guess. Even if it's a failure, that means that, okay, cool. We didn't waste enough time that there was a loss. We can pivot. How do we go from that to like the eventual finished product?
Yeah. It's very telling, and especially in the tech world, and especially in this industry. I mean, and we can unpack this. This like the cloud provider industry. It has changed radically since 2003. Like almost irrecognizable in terms of what are the common, most used case scenarios for cloud computing. It's night and day. So from your perspective, I mean, I'm not sure how long each of you have been involved in the company, but I mean, you can touch on that if you want. But how would you see the market has shifted, or how would you see this? What are the big evolutions that have happened since 2003 that Linode's had to kind of grapple with and build solutions for?
I think for us, from our perspective, what I've seen, the biggest thing we've had to grapple with is that idea of like single ecosystem product offerings. Like we largely were just a VM provider for 13 of our 16 years, and I think that we really took a step forward in the last two to try to broaden what we can provide. So things like, for us, block storage was like a big addition to our product offering. And it was at a time when like the simplicity of our, like, we have a couple of preset types of VM instances we deploy. And at that time, there wasn't that ability to say, oh, but I need more space. Like, oh, I need the ability to kind of like hot swap drives through from one machine to another. And a big push we had was, well, like, let's see, like, how can we offer services that, and to some extent, we would lose part of our customer base if we didn't give them the ability to really have this more like boutique, multifaceted type of ecosystem. And so like our big push now has been stuff like block storage, which transitions to some Ceph mastery, and then we can move on to things like object storage, which I think is like 1/nth more important and exciting for us to be able to provide. And then that kind of opened a cool door for us where like, we used to not do anything outside of that basic mold of our instance offering. And now we've got dedicated CPU, we've got high memory plans, we've got the actual GPU instances, which is like a big bump up in terms of what our portfolio of offerings is. Um, and we've also gotten into like a wild world now where we're building LKE clusters, which is kind of, I think, crazy. I think in the eyes of 2016 Linode, we would not have seen ourselves doing this. So that's
Yeah, LKE is the Linode Kubernetes engine.
Yeah,
It's been built into
I'd jumped to that assumption, but thank you for clarifying.
yeah.
um,
um, but like Kubernetes, I think is just one piece of what we have an entire team dedicated to, which is the third-party tools team, which is integration of our most basic offerings. So things like the Linode itself, just the actual VM. Like, how do you deploy that? Because that has radically changed in the last few years. Um, 10 years ago, 16 years ago, it would be, spin up the VM and then log in, secure it, configure your web server, do whatever it is that you need to do. And now there's so many tools out there that do that thing for you, right? And also do it in a way that makes it portable in some facet or in some fashion. For example, internally, we're a giant salt stack company. We do a ton of salt stack for our automation. And one of the tools that they provide is Salt Cloud, which is just a cloud native deployment engine. That Salt Cloud map that we deploy, you could take to any provider. So having that integration with Salt or something like Puppet or Ansible, Kubernetes, Terraform, all that stuff, that's what people are using.
right.
And for us to be able to offer those things and to have integration with those services really opens the door, and also makes it a lot easier to deploy on us, whether it's your full infra, even just portions of it.
Yeah, yeah, wow. So, and okay, so here's what I'm going to try and do. For people who might be listening, because I was explaining to Andrew before you guys hopped on that my channel has been for the longest time and still will continue to be very, very consumer facing in terms of the projects that I look at and Linux and open source stuff. And for me, I've had a very brief introduction to the world of cloud computing about a month ago, as a matter of fact. So I'm still very fresh. But for the benefit of those who might be listening, who most of what you just described was kind of lost on them, what would be kind of the simplest way that we could describe the evolution of Linode as from originally just providing VM instances on web infrastructure to what it's doing now? Like, I don't know if there's metaphors you want to use or whatever you want to do. Is there a simple way to describe it? Because I mean, for me, I'm really struggling to come up with a simple way to describe it because I haven't been in this world long enough. But if you can, great. If not, we can circle back around to it. What do you guys reckon? Do you want to tackle it?
I have like a loose analogy I
Of
could fire
course
across
you
the
do.
map. It's not even that super exciting. I would say that if you were to imagine Linode as your garage workspace, and you start and the first thing you buy is a drill press because boy, you're going to do some drill press stuff, and that could be your compute. It's a tool. It operates. It does a single thing. You probably do a lot of cool things with it, but it really just gets this one thing done. I think that is how Linode started. Single tool. If anybody needs it, you're the drill press guy. And I think what we've endeavored to do, and the way we've kind of, I think, had to evolve within the market that we exist in, is we've started building new tools to have in our garage. So now, you can do the drill pressing, but you also have a bandsaw, and you can build different things now. And we've endeavored to transition. In a lot of ways, I think there's this level from you start as this simple shop, and the upper echelon of that is you're an enterprise shop. And we've endeavored to add these tools over the course of the years, and in a lot of ways, it's been front loaded in the last 3 years, or back loaded in the last 3 years. And we've endeavored to add new tools that provide the ability for someone to get one step closer to our individual cloud environment being your enterprise level cloud environment.
Yeah.
Where everything you might require, whether it's specialized compute, if it's extra storage, if it's HA load balancing, if it's you want to roll up your sleeves and get into like a Kubernetes cluster, and the wizardry that is. Um, that's what we're trending towards. So
Yeah.
we are growing up from that sort of simple, home garage into this more, you know, enterprise oriented workshop.
And
Is that
that,
close?
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, and I mean, again, without getting into the wizardry of what all these different tools achieve and how they achieve them, there's, I can definitely resonate with what you're saying in terms of checking in with what you guys were doing. I think I first learnt about you as a company probably 2013, 2014. And yeah, and the way that you were positioning yourselves and the way that your website was describing what your offerings were and that kind of thing wasn't single track, but it definitely felt like it was more of a, hey, we've got services that can help you get your side project off the ground, or give you a little bit of extra flexibility to do stuff. Whereas now it definitely feels like you've got a much more built out kind of stack of solutions that you can say, well, we're actually capable of tackling quite a bit of stuff, to the point where somebody could run, a large majority, if not all, of their, what they want to achieve, with your services. So, seeing Linode grow as a company and what it's capable of, yeah, it's been very cool. And I think the garage analogy checks out. I think that works pretty well. Yep. What do you reckon, Joe? Did he do all right?
I think that works.
I think that works. Okay.
Better than anything I got. So.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's switch gears and talk about the process behind opening a data center, because obviously key to I can't talk. Key to your growth over the last few years, you've been gradually rolling out more data centers. I think the last time I was talking with Andrew, who was on the chat before we started recording, you guys were opening another one in, was it Toronto? Was
Yes.
that a year or two back?
So we actually this year began with our Toronto deploy.
Right.
Then we transitioned over to our Mumbai deploy.
Yep.
And Sydney was sort of like the cherry on the cupcake object of some sweet thing. That was the cherry on top. The sundae.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very good. So okay, so let's see what's the process here, and feel free to start at the thought process level. Like, why do you pick the locations that you do? What's the process once you've landed on a location? What are you looking for? And then feel free, talk us through the whole journey, and then I can kind of jump in with more specific questions as we go.
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of our data center deploys honestly start at customer request. So in the case of Sydney, it's been one of the oldest requests that we've ever had, and it's absolutely been out on our radar. We've always been able to serve that region to some degree. We have a data center in Fremont, California. We also have one in Singapore, and that kind of bridged the gap, but it was never really where we wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, as those requests just keep coming in, it's like, we got to do Sydney. We just got to do it. So once we've settled on a location, then it becomes honestly just a lot of logistics across multiple different teams. So our data center team will fly out there, visit a whole bunch of different facilities, whatever was within the region, until we can finally find one that meets our needs. Whether that's actual security policies or just general geolocation.
Mm-hmm.
And the network peers that we have access to, which is a big push for us sometimes, because we're endeavoring now, the networks we roll out now, the type of throughput we put into these DCs is like leaps and bounds above what we kind of initially started with. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of ways that it's got to kind of meet a certain set of prerequisites mm-hmm. to be even worth considering on our end.
Yeah. So, once all that's been handled and we have the go-ahead, it's a lot of hardware ordering, waiting for all that stuff to come in, get that all shipped out. And then we actually put boots on the ground. We get people over there. I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to go as the representative from our systems team. But we also sent over one of our network engineers and maybe 4 or 5 members of our data center team. Uh, and then it's a lot of like racket and stacking. Everything's built, everything's ready to go. So now it's like we got to build the cabinets, we've got to run all the cables, um, make sure that everything works, get everything through burn-in, make sure like everything it's supposed to work is actually doing the thing it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then at that point, you more or less have your physical data center,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the systems work really comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So we do the actual the
This is where Connor
provisioning of
gets
all.
really excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is where we actually begin all of our provisioning of all of the physical machines.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a lot of actually spinning up Linodes. We use the product that we sell.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where our automation really kicks into gear. And all the work that we've done on that like really comes into play. And, it's like, boom, just like that. We've got pretty much everything that we need ready to go.
Yeah, wow. I was going to say, so the timeline of opening a new data center now, I'm assuming is a lot more contracted than what it may have been in the first few rollouts of new data centers where you didn't have those automated, solutions.
Substantially lower now. But even in comparison to the beginning of the year with our Toronto data center, when we look at the actual timeline for that against the timeline for Sydney, it's somewhere around half.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we've been able to do a lot of work. Our data center team has done a tremendous amount of work. The actual time for them to give like a full handoff to everyone else, to our devs, to us, dropped in well over half just this year alone.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, good work, everyone. So when it comes to do you face? I've been told engineering is really problem solving. Like at its core, it's problem solving. So when it comes to rolling out a new data center, specifically the one in Sydney because it's close to home, were there particular challenges or particular issues that that you had to solve that were unique to that situation, or was it kind of just the average stuff that you're used to seeing at this point?
In a lot of ways, I think we've sort of developed kind of like a template for deployment, and that's sort of where we've started cutting that deployment time out, at least from the system side. So in a lot of ways, it was the same in Sydney as it was in Toronto and Mumbai. Other than within that kind of fast fail iterating mentality. With each DC we've done, we've sort of picked what are internal like a customer or internal infrastructure support systems that we have to roll out that sort of haven't felt the full touch of automation and or have like a sort of like an initial legacy build that we need to refactor to support some of the tools that we can use today. And so Sydney was kind of fun for us because Joe and I started on Toronto together, and prior to starting up Toronto, we made this big push to like automate deployment. We shouldn't be making these things by hand. We can let our configuration management tool, this SaltStack tool, handle so much of this for us, from even just the create a Linode part of the process. And so we really got to like fine tune things. And by the time we hit Sydney, I think, say we have, 70 services we have to, or 70 pieces of individual pieces of info we have to roll out. In the first like 3 days, we've knocked out like 60 of them. And so it's really just at this point, the more like finely tuned services that you have to kind of be mindful of. And there's still stuff, we've kind of been sort of putting things on a pedestal of like, let's make this better, let's make this better, let's make this faster, let's make this better. And I mean, at this point, I feel like Sydney's like the pinnacle of what our deployment processes can be. And so it was largely similar, but better.
That's nice. That's nice. I think just commenting on like I've never lived in Sydney. I've spent time in Sydney over different parts of my life, but there's definitely there definitely seems to be a lot of activity around around technological innovation and startup culture, and a lot of that momentum is kind of directed towards Sydney at this point. And I was saying to Andrew before we started recording that that I spent some time there for IBM's like Cloud Innovation Exchange, and and seeing just the sheer amount of developers and system managers representing different startups at that conference was it was pretty amazing. I think I just hadn't seen that world or seen that side of Australian business. So it's just interesting to hear from these different companies. Oh, and then not only that, but then like the week after that, you've got Microsoft doing their big innovation exchange in the very same conference center. I don't know. There just seems to be a fair bit of heat around Sydney. Oh, that's a bad joke. New South Wales is basically on fire right now.
I'm glad you made it and we
Oh
weren't
man, I
ourselves.
apologize for any people living in New South Wales who watch this stuff. Oh dear, well, anyway, we'll move on.
But Sydney's great.
Yeah, Sydney's great.
We're on board with that. I think it's funny. I didn't necessarily make that connection prior to us deciding that we were going to go and open up this Sydney DC. And I had known that we had Australian customers, but like Andrew was kind of walking us through this last week about, I guess Sydney is like the single largest population of developers in Australia, which I guess makes sense, but that's kind of exciting, and it's kind of cool to think about. It feels like it was good timing for us to be able to get ourselves together and get that DC deployed now, because it just seems like a good time to be there on like the ground, not the ground floor necessarily, but in like the ramp up
definitely
of Sydney's development community.
Definitely, yeah. And so this is going to kind of segue perfectly into our next kind of area here, talking about so like this channel and what so many of my viewers, subscribers, we're all really excited about anytime open source tools become part of the mainstream conversation around DevOps, or whether it's just around everyday computing. And so from my observations around this industry, and again only really being in this world for about a month or so, of seeing what's around and kind of having a little bit more vocabulary to understand what's going on, is that the open source tools that are out there are some of the best in the business, if not the best in the business, when it comes to cloud computing and being able to deploy instances of whatever it is that you want. So I guess the question that I'm wanting to hash out with you guys is what's the importance of the open cloud? And I kind of put those in quotes because quite often we can end up falling into this world of just buzzwords, and yes, I've seen a lot of them in the last month. But what does that, like, what is the value of open source tools, and what you guys offer as a company that kind of puts those first and foremost in your product offerings? And you're very open about the fact that you utilize these tools, that you value these tools, that you're big on open source, and then obviously your engagement in and around the Linux community is also fairly well known at this point as well. So what's the value of that for you guys as a company?
Sure. So I think so when we look at our like third-party tools team as an example, I think that really embodies what the open cloud is. So at this point, you have so many different tools that can deploy services, that can manage all of your tools, or all of your instances, whatever it might be, and being able to utilize those on our platform, I think is a very important thing, right? When you look at maybe portability or diversifying your fleet or something like that, having that integration with, like I mentioned earlier, Salt Cloud as just a simple example, to just say, I have 10 instances here on Linode, I have instances somewhere else, and it doesn't take any additional effort on your end. I think that's a really big thing. And the other part is also that ability to maybe be able to move between different cloud providers. Um, Having integration with those tools is what really gets you that flexibility. When you look at like other competitors that are doing um, like very, very custom made tools, they're doing things that only they do, right? There's no portability there whatsoever. You're now locked in. When you rely on that tool now, you don't have a way out. Your way out is to completely rethink and recreate like what it is that you're doing. Whereas with a lot of these open source tools, just simply saying Linode is the target for this, and boom, you're up and running. There's a lot of power in that.
Yep, yep. If from my perspective, only being in this world for a short amount of time, there's definitely this sense that that the first phase of cloud computing and the way that it was rolled out was definitely around the big players, siloed kind of solutions where you kind of take what you need to a company, they go, we'll do the whole thing for you, and voila, we have vendor lock-in. Whereas it definitely feels like these tools and these frameworks have gotten to the point now where people can build a lot more, bespoke kind of solutions and be able to, find the right combination of stuff that's going to work for them and their whatever their end goal is. And I guess the question that I have for you guys is that obviously when you're building, these open tools, and you're building things that, like you said, are portable and they can allow for a lot more bespoke solutions. I guess the question is, obviously, the single vendor lock-in model has been wildly profitable for certain companies that will remain nameless. What you guys offer being a lot more open, flexible, portable, agile, that kind of thing. That in terms of growing a business and turning a profit and that kind of thing, do you think that in the long run that this model, this more open, portable model, is financially viable compared to the monolithic vendor lock-in that we've had up to this point?
So that's a funny question, because being that you're talking to the end, like the systems team here, in a lot of ways, I think our opinion of that is more idyllic, I guess, in
Sure.
how we see it.
We need to get
and I think,
we need to get a member of the, the financial team
but
in
I
here.
think, in a lot of ways, we're active participants in this community outside of our roles here at Linode, and I think from our perspective, we think that there's a lot of benefit and a lot of ways in which this sort of mindset's viable if we foster a community where we're excited about empowering people and giving people the ability to build the things they want without restrictions, with a sense of simplicity in place, with simplicity and yet the ability to find that complexity if you need it, and to ramp up the way you do your, like, you handle your fleet or whatever it may be you're deploying. I kind of think there's a world on our end where our internal culture really is in support of that open cloud mindset, and I'm sure there's some like a hard way in which, functioning as a business, we're missing out by not locking people in, by not making our systems complex to the point where but you have to do it through the specific Linode way and the specific Linode platform. But that's not what I think we're about. And I think a lot of ways, the way our company is run and the way our ownership works, where we are just an independent company, we're funding ourselves, we're operating within the constraints of what we can do for ourselves. I think there's just a big zeitgeist here that we don't want to trend towards a place where we're trying to be like a high dictator of how your cloud environment must be deployed. And I'm sure that there's small things that we miss out on, not kind of enforcing that single tenant cloud environment. But I don't know, emotionally, it feels better to be living in the world that we are living in here.
Yeah.
I mean, also for what it's worth, it makes it slightly more fun to work here
Mm.
because that mentality is supported pretty nicely. Um, so like you get like a little emotional hit for things you do, and you're like, yeah, this is cool.
Mm.
This is we're not being jerks about this. We're just like building cool things.
Yeah,
So
yeah, definitely. And I feel like, especially, I mean, you referred to, I guess, the zeitgeist, but there's definitely, we're at this moment in tech, and especially the way that people perceive big tech in terms of trust and privacy and all of those things that that I think those, big players are quickly discovering that those things, privacy and trust, are actually things that maybe they haven't fully calculated into how customers perceive what they have to offer, and utilizing open source tools, being a lot more transparent, focusing on how you present yourself as a company, the way that you support your customers, the way that you kind of tailor make things to what your customers are looking for. I think that's I don't know, the way that I see it anyway, moving forward into the future. I can see those things becoming a lot more valuable than perhaps just being the cheapest sort of provider on the block. As people become, more picky about, I guess, the values that a company has, or the where they choose to put their focus. Are they just turning a profit, or is there actually some transparency here? Are they complying, or are they just kind of locking it all behind a big wall and saying, "Don't worry, we'll handle it"? So yeah, there's it definitely seems like, even in the vernacular that a lot of the big players are using now, there seems to be that shift in focus of like, oh, we want to embrace open source, and we definitely see that as the future. And yeah, definitely, I don't know, a sense that there must be some value that these big players are starting to see in utilizing a lot of the tools and frameworks that players such as yourself have been using for a while now. I don't know. I love seeing the different sort of shifts in the industry, and what we perceive as valuable, and what ends up getting our money in terms of building solutions for our problems. I think just from a business point of view, that's fascinating. Yeah.
yeah,
um,
I think we're right there with you on that one.
yeah.
From the loose system side, very much outsider perspective of what the actual machine business engine is fully doing.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about if people wanted to get involved in your line of work, or if they wanted to start doing the kinds of things that you guys are doing. What would you kind of recommend as a good pathway into your kind of role?
Yeah. I think we would both agree that, to an extent, a lot of our success, our individual personal success, has been largely in part assisted by our support team, right? So getting in on like the ground floor, I guess, of our support team was very important to us. Our support team is kind of, you kind of make your own way, I guess, in a lot of ways. We give you the tools, we give you the assistance, but no one's just reading from a script. When you write in or you call in with an issue, we're going to do the research.
Mm.
So every single person that's on our support team, they're almost like fully fledged sysadmins. They could go to anywhere and be successful. So that was a really, really big thing for us, I think.
Yeah.
But I think like becoming familiar with how different services work, that's a really big one. Like knowing how to stand up a resolver or something, or how DHCP works, and just kind of developing your own little like, test platform. Kind of making your own home lab in a way. And it doesn't even need to be much. Things like Raspberry Pis. If you're talking just strictly something at home, you can do a tremendous amount with anymore. Or using us. I mean, our instances are ephemeral. I mean, you can stand it up, do your service, set it up, kind of become familiar with it, destroy it, and just leveraging what exists in the cloud in that aspect is huge for learning. Um,
I would also, not to cut in, but
yeah.
I think like from my perspective, like my growth in the Linux field in general, and the systems engineering field, is it's there's so much out there that people can just pick up and learn. There are so many free resources. There are so many helpful communities. There's like, one of the cool part about working here. One of the cool parts about working here was being exposed to like your external community in terms of your customers and what they're doing and the types of you know communities they're building on their side. Then there's the kind of internal community where we're just generally Linux enthusiastic, and so like everybody's down to learn more about how the systems work. Everybody's doing their own tests. There's like a great exchange of knowledge, and in a lot of ways, like you eat this person's brains, eat this person's brains, and suddenly you're this like zombie amalgamation of the entire support team's Linux knowledge.
Mm.
And I think that like that hunger and like enthusiasm to learn new things, like skyrockets your ability to participate in like a Linux career.
Mm.
Um, in a lot of ways, like if you can find that, if you can find what makes it fun for you. I mean, I think we're both kind of lucky that in a lot of ways, like, we work 9 to 5s with some flexibility, but I think we're generally enthusiastic about coming into work. And I
Mm.
feel like we get to work on things that are cool, and we're building unique things, and we're looking forward while also having this like fun hindsight of, the more power you gain, you get to look behind you and say, we could make that better.
Mm.
And I think just like capturing that enthusiasm for yourself, and finding what like keeps, that weird self-rewarding kind of like, oh, I learned this today. I stood up a mail server today. I
Mhm.
did this today. I learned what DKIM is today. Like stuff like that. Like if you can just get enthusiastic about it, like the sky's the limit when it
Yeah.
comes to how much information is like out there for you to consume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I would probably pass that advice on basically to anybody who's getting into Linux on any for any particular reason. Like that holds true. I mean, I've been doing this stuff for probably 10, 11 years, and it's all been very consumer facing, and that's where my channel started and all that kind of thing. But it's definitely true. Like if you can keep teaching yourself more stuff and learning more stuff about it, that kind of reward cycle builds, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I actually know a fair bit about this thing and I want to learn more.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, no,
absolutely.
that's really good. Sorry, Joe, you were going to say something before?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Something else to like absolutely look into is meetups and conferences in your area. So within the states, I'm not sure if it extends past that, but there's a series of events. They're the Linux Fest events.
Mm.
I've been to, I think, 4 of them now, and they're absolutely phenomenal. I know the one that runs in the Northwest, up in Washington, I believe is a like pay what you can kind of model. So it become, it's very inclusive, but you're not getting the people that are like showing up because their boss sent them,
Mm.
right? These kind of events are attracting people who are absolutely, truly just invested in this community,
Mm.
and they have so much to share and so much to offer. Those events can really change like the way that you perceive things, the way that you're approaching things, or even just solving that little one-off problem that you had.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I would strongly recommend just looking at those local events and attending.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would agree with that. I have not had the pleasure of being able to get to one of these events. There was one that was in Brisbane a few years back. I can't remember what it was called. I think it was just called Linux Conf. And yeah, and I got an invitation to it. And I was like, it's just not going to work out calendar wise. But now that I'm moving to Southeast Queensland, hopefully when things swing by that way again, I'll be all for it. Okay, so there was one last thing that I kind of want to get in there before we kind of wrap up, as we're not quite clocking in at an hour yet, so we're doing pretty well. In terms of like, I'm just wanting to, for the sake of those watching, give me some of the most common or even some of the most interesting application of Linode's tools, services, what you guys provide in terms of like customer stories. What are some of the most common ones, or what are some of the more like interesting, just kind of weird, out there, kind of inspiring ones that you guys have I don't know, that you guys have heard of? What are the most sort of what are the most common scenarios?
I've got a common and a unique.
Okay.
Uh, the unique is I was talking to a guy back when I was doing support, and I know he's still doing this now, but was like running his entire like farm system automation platform on Linode. And so he had like a bunch of like IoT devices like tethered to like what gates were open on his farm and stuff like that, and like just the general like system health of his farm. I thought that was like spectacular.
That is
It's like
wild.
it's
Yeah.
like
It's Farm OS.
yeah, I
So
think that's
yes.
a really cool. That's like a very cool, and I think there's more people who do it. That's just the one guy I know.
That's like the one that you want to make the TV commercial about, and then put Linode's like brand all over it.
Dude, it's like that movie with Matt Damon where he's like making like art. I think whoever it is, either Matt Damon or Matthew McConaughey, and he's like making automated like drones. It might be Interstellar. He's using drones to like make his farm equipment like
Yes.
AI.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
It's just like it's Matthew McConaughey just like throwing his like his sweaty work shirt over his back, like really getting in there, like working on some Linode things, and it just like fades in like Linode.
Yeah.
Your farm in the cloud.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, I can see it now.
So that's my exciting one.
Yeah. Cool.
The most common one is people running WordPress servers, which is totally cool and awesome and gives you this wonderful bootstrapped website functionality. The PSA of the day is please, as much as you can, in every way you can, keep everything in your WordPress server up to date and defend yourself against the wolves of fraudly ne'er-do-wellers. So that's the
good
that's
advice.
common.
Good advice. Quickly checks his WordPress server. Oh dear. Yeah, cool. Did you have any stories you wanted to throw in there, Joe, before we start wrapping up?
Ooh, yeah, I don't have anything that exciting, but I think like some of the more unique things that people are doing, they're using like just on-demand instances for things. So there's like game services I wish I could, mention that will just at the drop of a hat, under certain load, just boom, fire up a new instance, and the moment it's not needed, just blow it away.
Yeah.
That level of automation and leveraging, what some people would just perceive as a long-term investment. It's completely counter to that.
Yeah.
But outside of WordPress stuff,
Squid proxies.
Squid proxies.
Squid proxies.
Yeah, proxies or just VPNs in general. They're always very popular.
Sure.
And I know the YouTube space definitely loves VPNs, it seems. So, if you are interested in VPNs, there is other solutions, ones that you can control to a much finer degree.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. There definitely seems to be a lot of interest in, like traditionally speaking, VPNs in general were picking up a lot of interest, and now I think we're kind of getting to the point where everybody knows what a VPN is. Like I'm a high school teacher, and even grade 7s, little 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds know what a VPN is because it's the thing that allows their iPad to access all of the internet at school. But the technologically savvy are realizing that maybe it's a better idea to have your own VPN as opposed to just jumping on someone else's boat. Anyway, well, this has been a lot of fun. So if people were I don't know, if people were wanting to just get their toes wet and look at what would you recommend as just a good place to start with checking out what some of the things that Linode offers? Where would you recommend as a good starting point?
Yeah, I would say like depending on your skill level, maybe look at our one-click apps. So these are like predefined servers. They stand up in a minute or two, and then they have whatever that application is. So if you've never done web hosting, you've never messed with WordPress, you've never had a website or a blog or something, we have a one-click app for WordPress. It'll set it up. It'll secure it to some degree. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, it's got a pretty decent, I think, initial security. The problem with that stuff is the add-ons.
It's your
Yeah. So sane defaults.
Absolutely. Same defaults is just be careful of all the weird plugins that you install.
Yeah, right.
But that gets you up and running in a couple of minutes, and now you have a website that you can play with. And that's like, if you've never like dipped your toes into that kind of environment or like servers or anything like that, that's a great place to start.
And cost wise, like the great place to start in terms of, you know, a simple web hosting WordPress kind of solution is not that pricey either. Like I'm just kind of looking at, let me just pull something up real quick, but it's pretty affordable. Let's see, it's like it's like $5 a month.
$5 a month, you can build a website that can handle a pretty legitimate amount of traffic.
That's unreal, isn't it?
Yeah. And in the event that you needed more, there's always ways to
scale it up.
Scale up, reallocate your resources.
I'd also just throw it out there. One cool thing, depending on your skill set again, and depending on what your level of familiarity with this is. So we recently rolled out our first object storage cluster, and one of the really cool additions to that is there's like a static website hosting functionality within that. So you can just get your object storage bucket going. You can throw in some website content, and then suddenly you can just statically host a website without actually having to run a server yourself, which I think is kind of cool, especially because like sometimes I think we see this in our teams. There can sometimes be like a weird break between like that dev skill set and the actual system skill set of running the things you made, and I think that's like kind of a cool like shorthand way to like get involved in the platform and use some of what we're offering.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great static site builders out there. We also have a huge like array of documentation available for pretty much everything. So if it's, you know, you're looking at different game servers, we have guides on exactly what you need to do to host this kind of game server. You know, maybe like a Minecraft server or something. You know, with the static sites, we have guides on how you would do that. So our documentation is excellent. There's, you know, that team does a phenomenal job. I mean, definitely check out docs. You know, if you're looking for ways to use us, there's tons of them there. If you just need that little assistance, there's a good chance that we've encountered and we've got exactly what that bug fix is somewhere in those docs.
Yeah, excellent, so good. Hey, look, just as we're wrapping up here, is there a go-to, I guess, you know, question platform or email or I mean, you guys could, you know, share your Twitter handles if you want to do that, but is there like a go-to place that if people have questions about, you know, what we've been talking about and they wanted to chat to somebody maybe about their own, you know, setting up their own solution or anything, what would you guys recommend as the best place to do that?
support@linode.com. Yeah, that's the support team, and they're spectacular. They'll definitely, you want to give us a call and just chit chat about how you're planning on using the platform and just some general questions of what the environment's like here. Like they're super open for that. We have like we have a community site too that you can interact with, which I think is great, and it's sort of kind of like this sort of blossoming mixture of our support staff and some of our more savvy users. If you want to get like a kind of a community forum kind of exposure,
gotta love the forums.
Yep.
Yep. Excellent. No, so good. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been great being able to chat through some of this stuff with you guys, and obviously, like, I mean, there's for those of you who are tuning in and watching today's episode, definitely go and check out what Linode have to offer, and they've been very supportive of this channel and many other Linux channels across the interwebs. So definitely give them the time if you're looking at you know, deploying any kind of cloud server. But yeah, special thanks to you guys, Connor and Joe, for coming on and being able to talk us through some of this stuff and tell some stories. It's been a lot of fun. Well, yeah, everybody, I hope by the time this episode airs, we've probably gone through Christmas and we're probably headed towards the new year, if not in the new year already. So Connor and Joe, have a Merry Christmas, because it is Christmas Eve here in my world. In your world, it's the day before or the night before Christmas Eve. And yeah, have a fantastic new year. And to everyone watching, whenever this video ends up coming live, thanks for tuning in, and like, subscribe, comment, all that kind of thing. And we'll see you in the very next episode. Peace out, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Excellent.